You expect me to believe that these endotherms can survive on Glacius Prime? Professor Zixtal's facial tentacles writhed in what his species considered laughter. The temperature alone would— With all due respect, Professor, interrupted Dr. Rodriguez, her dark eyes glinting with barely contained amusement. I think you'll find humans rather resourceful when it comes to cold environments. The xenobiology conference room fell silent. 27 different species of academics, researchers, and theoretical survivalists turned their various sensory organs toward the heated exchange. Some literally heated, as the Magmarians in the back row were starting to smolder with interest. Resourceful? The professor's bioluminescent spots flashed in patterns of deep skepticism. The average surface temperature is negative 120 degrees Celsius. Your species evolved on a tropical world. Semi-tropical in some regions, Dr. Rodriguez corrected, pulling up a holographic display. And we've had plenty of practice with cold environments. In fact, I've brought along one of our survival specialists to demonstrate— Absolutely not! Zixtal's tentacles went rigid with alarm. I won't be party to the death of a human just to prove a point. Hey folks, sorry I'm late. A stocky figure in standard thermal wear burst through the door, carrying what appeared to be primitive tools. Traffic was terrible. Somebody's spacecraft took up like 4 parking spots. Zixtal's spots shifted to a pale yellow of confusion. Who is this? Jack O'Neill, survival specialist, the newcomer said cheerfully, already unpacking his gear. Originally from Minnesota, but I've spent the last decade teaching Arctic survival techniques to research teams. Doc Rodriguez said you folks needed a demonstration. Mr. O'Neill, I must protest, Zixtal began, his translator struggling to keep up with his agitated tentacle movements. The environment of Glacius Prime is completely hostile to— Oh great, you've got the environmental simulator running. Jack gestured to the holographic display. Mind if I pop in there for about 10 minutes? Always wanted to try building an igloo in super low temps. Before anyone could object, Jack had already stepped into the simulator chamber. The room's safety protocols automatically engaged, creating a perfect replica of Glacius Prime's surface conditions. The assembled academics watched in horror as the temperature plummeted. Is he humming? Asked a Venusian researcher, their gas bag body expanding slightly in surprise. Indeed, Jack was humming what sounded suspiciously like Let It Snow, as he expertly began cutting blocks from the compressed ice and snow. His movements were swift and practiced, each block placed with precision that spoke of years of experience. Impossible, muttered Zixtal, his spots now cycling through colors of disbelief. The human's external membrane should be freezing solid. That external membrane is actually an advanced thermal suit, Dr. Rodriguez explained, unable to keep the smugness from her voice. Our own design, based on centuries of Arctic exploration. The primitive tools are similarly specialized. We've been dealing with extreme cold since before we discovered fire. The assembled academics watched in fascination as Jack continued building, the igloo taking shape with remarkable speed. His movements never slowed despite the brutally cold environment. If anything, he seemed to be enjoying himself. 7 minutes, 30 seconds, announced the simulation's AI. Structure is maintaining internal temperature differential of positive 15 degrees Celsius compared to external environment. But that's just a primitive ice shelter! Zixtal protested, though his tentacles were starting to droop in resignation. Sometimes the primitive solutions are the best ones, Jack's voice came through the comm system. We figured out igloos weren't just shells of ice pretty early on. The engineering is actually pretty sophisticated. The blocks are arranged in a spiral, the entrance tunnel acts as a cold sink, and the interior gets lined with snow for insulation. Been keeping humans alive in extreme conditions for thousands of years. 8 minutes, 45 seconds. The AI updated. Structure integrity at 100%. Internal temperature now positive 20 degrees Celsius compared to external environment. Dr. Rodriguez smiled at her colleague. You know, Professor, humans have a saying. Necessity is the mother of invention. We didn't evolve with fur or natural antifreeze in our blood like some species. We had to figure out how to survive in every environment we encountered. It's kind of our thing. 9 minutes, 30 seconds. Structure is now capable of supporting long-term human habitation with minimal energy input. Jack emerged from the simulator, brushing some synthetic snow from his shoulders. That was fun. Anyone want to come check it out? The view of the ice fields is pretty spectacular from inside. The room erupted in a chaos of questions, with various species trying to understand how such a primitive solution could work so effectively. Several of the more adventurous academics were already requesting permission to enter the simulator and examine the structure. Zixtal's spots had settled into a pale blue of contemplation. Perhaps, he said slowly. I need to revise my paper on human environmental adaptability. Perhaps, Dr. Rodriguez agreed diplomatically, though she couldn't quite hide her grin. And maybe next time we can demonstrate how humans survived in the desert. Ever heard of a solar still? The professor's tentacles curled in horror. You mean you have primitive solutions for hot environments too? Oh, Professor, Jack chuckled, packing away his tools. We have primitive solutions for everything. It's kind of our specialty. Although these days we usually just build climate-controlled habitats. But it's good to know the old ways, you know? Never know when you might need to survive on an ice planet. The Magmarians in the back row had finally stopped smoldering and were now frantically taking notes. The Venusian researchers were attempting to replicate the igloo's design in miniature using their atmospheric manipulation abilities. Even the usually aloof quantum collective seemed interested, their probability clouds shifting to analyze the structure's efficiency. I don't understand, Zixtal admitted finally. Your species is classified as a moderate environment evolved civilization. How did you develop such extensive survival capabilities? Dr. Rodriguez shared a knowing look with Jack. Well, Professor, that's an interesting story. You see, humans have this peculiar trait. We're never quite satisfied staying in our comfort zone. We see a mountain, we want to climb it. We see an ocean, we want to cross it. We see an ice planet. You want to build houses on it. The professor finished, his spots showing a mix of resignation and reluctant admiration. Exactly, Jack beamed. Speaking of which, has anyone actually colonized Glacius Prime yet? Because I know a few folks back home who'd love a challenge like that. Great skiing potential, at the very least. The professor's facial tentacles tied themselves in knots trying to process that statement. The idea of choosing to live in such an environment for recreational purposes was clearly shorting out several of his neural clusters. I believe, Dr. Rodriguez said diplomatically, this might be a good time to break for lunch. Professor, would you care to join us? Jack makes an excellent thermos of hot chocolate, another primitive human solution to cold environments. As the academics filed out of the conference room, still buzzing with discussion about the demonstration, Zixtal found himself wondering what other surprises these supposedly fragile humans had up their sleeves. He made a mental note to be more careful about underestimating them in the future. After all, any species that could turn survival in lethal conditions into a recreational activity was probably capable of anything. The next day, the conference organizers had to add 3 new sessions to the schedule. Human Primitive Technology, a comprehensive overview. Adaptation versus Evolution, the human approach to hostile environments. And Recreational Extreme Environment Activities, a study in human risk assessment, or lack thereof. Jack was asked to do 2 more demonstrations. He built a solar still, a desert shelter, and somehow managed to start a fire using ice as a lens. The Magmarians were particularly impressed by that last one. Dr. Rodriguez's paper on human environmental adaptation strategies became the most cited work in xenobiology that year. Though some critics claimed her demonstration was unnecessarily theatrical, no one could deny the effectiveness of the results. As for Professor Zixtal, he did indeed revise his paper. The new title read, Human Primitive Technology, an Analysis of Elegant Solutions in Hostile Environment Survival. It won several awards and became required reading at the Galactic Academy. He still refused to try the hot chocolate, though. Some things were a step too far, even in the name of science. 3 months later, the Galactic Academic Council was facing an unprecedented situation. Applications for their Extreme Environment Studies program had increased by 300%, with a particularly notable surge in requests for joint research projects with human institutions. I blame you for this, Professor Zixtal said to Dr. Rodriguez as they reviewed the latest batch of proposals. His spots were cycling through shades of exasperated amusement. Ever since that demonstration, everyone wants to study primitive human survival techniques. I prefer to think of it as renewed interest in practical solutions, she replied, scrolling through her holopad. Though I have to admit, some of these proposals are interesting. Interesting? Zixtal's tentacles curled in what had become his signature expression of human-induced confusion. The Magmarians want to establish a permanent research station in the Arctic to study human cold weather adaptation techniques. The Quantum Collective is requesting permission to observe human mountain climbers, and don't even get me started on the Venusians' proposal to experience human recreational survival activities firsthand? Dr. Rodriguez finished, trying not to laugh. Yes, I saw that one. We had to explain that jumping out of perfectly good aircraft with only a fabric device for descent control might not be suitable for gaseous-based life forms. That's not even the most concerning part, Zixtal said, pulling up another document. Have you seen the latest data from Glacius Prime? Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened as she read the report. They're actually doing it? Already? 3 research outposts and a small permanent settlement, Zixtal confirmed. Apparently your Mr. O'Neill's comment about skiing potential sparked quite a bit of interest. They're calling it the Glacius Prime Winter Sports and Research Complex. Jack will be thrilled, Dr. Rodriguez said. Though I should warn you, once humans start developing winter sports facilities, things tend to get elaborate. Elaborate how? Zixtal asked, his spots shifting to a concerned purple. Before Dr. Rodriguez could answer, their discussion was interrupted by a priority message notification. The holographic display showed a live feed from Glacius Prime, where a human figure was sliding down one of the planet's massive ice cliffs on what appeared to be a modified gravitic board. Is that? Zixtal began. Jack? Yes, it is, Dr. Rodriguez sighed. And before you ask, yes, that's probably exactly as dangerous as it looks. They watched as Jack navigated the near-vertical ice face, occasionally jumping off natural ramps and performing aerial maneuvers that made Zixtal's tentacles twist themselves into knots. A small crowd of various alien species could be seen at the bottom, recording the descent with a mix of horror and fascination. He's testing the slopes for the Extreme Sports Division, Dr. Rodriguez explained, reading the attached report. Apparently they're planning to host something called the Interstellar Winter Games next year. Your species, Zixtal said slowly, takes environments that should kill you, finds ways to survive in them, and then deliberately makes the experience more dangerous. For fun? More or less, Dr. Rodriguez agreed, though we prefer to think of it as pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Speaking of which, how do you feel about mountain climbing? The Quantum Collective's research team could really use an experienced xenobiologist for their observation project. Zixtal's spots went completely white. I think I'll stick to the academic side of things, thank you. Someone has to maintain scientific objectivity in all this enthusiasm. Fair enough, Dr. Rodriguez laughed. Though you might want to prepare yourself. I heard the Magmarians are planning to demonstrate their new human-inspired thermal suits at next month's conference. Something about controlled temperature reduction for enhanced cognitive performance. Please tell me they're not planning to build a snow castle in the middle of their volcanic homeworld? That's exactly what they're planning. Apparently they've developed quite a fascination with human snow sculpture techniques. Zixtal's tentacles drooped in resignation. I suppose I should start working on another paper. The cultural impact of human survival techniques on galactic society, perhaps? Good title. Dr. Rodriguez nodded. Though you might want to wait a bit before publishing. Once the Interstellar Winter Games get going, you'll have a lot more material to work with. As if to emphasize her point, the feed from Glacius Prime showed Jack landing his final jump in a spray of ice crystals, to the enthusiastic tentacle waving and spot flashing of his alien audience. Several Venusians had already formed a queue near the slope's starting point, their specially designed environmental suits gleaming in the pale light of the ice planet's 3 moons. You know what the really interesting part is? Dr. Rodriguez said, watching the scene with evident pride. 6 months ago, most of these species would never have considered visiting an ice planet, let alone trying to live on one. Now look at them. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. All because one human decided to build an igloo in 10 minutes. A rather elegant solution in retrospect, Zixtal admitted, his spots showing hints of grudging respect. Though I still maintain that recreational ice cliff sliding is a sign of questionable judgment. Maybe. Dr. Rodriguez smiled. But you have to admit, it makes for some excellent research opportunities. How many papers have been published on human adrenaline responses in the past 3 months alone? 73, Zixtal replied automatically, with another 32 under peer review, including 3 on the apparently infectious nature of human recreational risk-taking behavior. They both looked at the feed again, where a Magmarian was now attempting to create a snowman while maintaining their usual surface temperature of 800 degrees Celsius. Somehow they were making it work. I suppose, Zixtal said finally, this is what they mean by human influence on galactic culture? Oh no, Dr. Rodriguez grinned. This is just the beginning. Wait until they discover what humans can do in zero gravity. Zixtal's spots went pale again. Please tell me you're joking. I could, she said, pulling up another proposal on her holopad. But then I'd have to explain why the Quantum Collective is requesting funding for something called space parkour research. In the background, the feed from Glacius Prime showed Jack teaching a group of enthusiastic aliens how to have a proper snowball fight. The Magmarians had already developed a technique for flash freezing their projectiles mid-throw, creating spectacular ice crystal explosions. Just another day in the ongoing saga of human influence on galactic society. At this rate, they'd need to create a whole new academic discipline just to study the phenomenon. Zixtal made a mental note to copyright the term human adaptation studies before someone else thought of it. He had a feeling it was going to become very popular very soon. 1 year later, the inaugural interstellar winter games on Glacius Prime had exceeded all expectations, though perhaps not in ways anyone had anticipated. "I still don't understand," Professor Zixtal said, watching the closing ceremony from the climate-controlled observation deck. "How did we go from survival demonstrations to this?" This referred to the spectacular scene below, where representatives from 37 different species were participating in what could only be described as the galaxy's most unusual ice ballet. The Magmarians had perfected their thermal control to such a degree that they were now creating elaborate steam patterns as they glided across the ice, while the Quantum Collective had discovered they could achieve previously impossible probability states through what they termed sick jumps. Dr. Rodriguez, now serving as the head of the newly established Department of Xeno-Recreational Studies at the Galactic Academy, smiled as she watched a Venusian gas form execute a perfect triple axel. "It's quite simple, really. Once other species realized that humans didn't just survive in extreme environments, but found ways to enjoy them, they became curious about what they might be missing." "But synchronized ice dancing? With Magmarians?" "You have to admit the steam effects are quite beautiful," she replied. "And their paper on thermal gradient manipulation in artistic expression is groundbreaking. 3 different engineering departments are already working on practical applications." The professor's spots shifted to a contemplative blue. "I suppose that's the most surprising part. All these recreational activities are actually advancing serious scientific research." "That's humans for you. We'll turn anything into either a sport or a science project, usually both." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the competitors' area. Jack O'Neill, now the game's director of innovation and probably the only person in the galaxy with that job title, was demonstrating something new to an eager crowd of alien athletes. "Is that a hot tub?" Zixtal asked, his tentacles curling in disbelief. "Outdoor hot spring design, actually," Dr. Rodriguez corrected. "The engineering team figured out how to maintain a stable liquid water environment in the open air, even at these temperatures. The Magmarians are particularly excited about it. Apparently, the extreme temperature differential creates some fascinating thermodynamic effects they'd never been able to study before." "And the snow sculptures around it?" "Oh, those are from the Cultural Exchange Division. Did you know the Quantum Collective can create sculptures that exist in multiple probability states simultaneously? They're calling it Schrödinger's snow art. There's already talk about a dedicated gallery." Below them, Jack was now explaining the concept of a polar plunge to a fascinated group of xenobiologists. Several of them were taking detailed notes on human endocrine responses to extreme temperature changes. "Your latest paper is causing quite a stir, by the way," Dr. Rodriguez mentioned casually. "The revolutionary impact of human recreational behaviors on interspecies understanding is already being called a seminal work in the field." Zixtal's spots flickered with academic pride. "Well, one can hardly ignore the evidence. In just 18 months, we've seen unprecedented advances in environmental adaptation technology, cross-species cultural exchange, and theoretical physics, all because humans decided to turn survival into a sport." "Don't forget the culinary advances," Dr. Rodriguez added. "Ever since someone introduced the Magmarians to the concept of flame-grilled food, they've been revolutionizing high-temperature cooking techniques. Though I'm still not sure about their interpretation of s'mores." Yes, the plasma-toasted carbon-based nutrient squares. I heard they're quite popular in the volcanic sector now." Their attention was drawn back to the ice as the closing ceremony reached its climax. In a display that would have been impossible a year ago, representatives from every participating species were creating a collaborative performance that showcased their unique adaptations to the extreme environment. Magmarians danced through steam clouds, while Venusians shaped the ice with controlled atmospheric effects. The Quantum Collective's contribution existed in several dimensions simultaneously, somehow managing to be both aesthetically pleasing and a valid physics experiment. "You know what the best part is?" Dr. Rodriguez said softly. "Look at them all. A year ago, most of these species couldn't even be in the same environment without elaborate protective measures. Now they're creating art together. On an ice planet that was considered uninhabitable, Zixtal added, his spots showing genuine wonder, using techniques derived from what I once dismissed as primitive survival methods. Speaking of which, have you seen the preliminary proposals for next year's Summer Games? The professor's spots went pale. Summer Games? Oh yes, the Magmarians are quite keen to host. Something about wanting to show off their new extreme cooling sports facilities. Apparently they've become quite fond of swimming pools. Swimming pools? In a volcanic environment? With appropriate safety measures, of course. Though I should warn you, Jack's been consulting on the design, and I heard him use the phrase lava surfing in a recent meeting. Zixtal's tentacles tied themselves in knots. Perhaps I should start working on another paper. The Psychological Analysis of Human Risk Assessment, a Study in Controlled Chaos? Good title. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, though you might want to wait until after the demonstration next week. The Quantum Collective is planning to attempt something they're calling a quantum synchronized diving routine. I don't suppose there's any chance of returning to simple survival demonstrations. Are you kidding? The Venusians just figured out how to play volleyball in their gaseous form. There's no going back now. As if to emphasize her point, a cheer went up from the crowd below as Jack successfully taught a group of Magmarians how to make ice cream, using their natural body heat as a temperature differential. Several theoretical physicists in the audience were frantically taking notes. You have to admit, Dr. Rodriguez said, watching the scene with evident satisfaction. We've come a long way from that first 10-minute igloo. Indeed, Zixtal agreed, his spots showing a complex pattern that somehow managed to convey both academic interest and resigned acceptance. Though I do have one question. Yes? What exactly is lava surfing, and why do I have a feeling I'm going to regret asking? Dr. Rodriguez just smiled. Let's just say the Summer Games are going to be very interesting. You might want to start working on that paper sooner rather than later. In the distance, a Magmarian successfully landed what they claimed was the galaxy's first thermal freestyle snowboard trick, creating a spectacular display of instantaneously frozen steam crystals. 3 different research teams immediately began analyzing the physics involved. Just another day in the ongoing evolution of human-influenced galactic culture. At this rate, they'd need to build a whole new academic complex just to house all the emerging disciplines. Zixtal made a mental note to copyright the term extreme environment recreation studies before someone else thought of it. He had a feeling it was going to become very popular very soon, especially once everyone found out about the plans for the zero-gravity games. But that was a paper for another day. 6 months later, the Galactic Academic Council found itself addressing an unprecedented phenomenon that had spread far beyond sports and survival techniques. They called it the Human Adaptation Cascade Effect, though most species just referred to it as pulling a human. Professor Zixtal sat in his office, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from across the galaxy. His spots had settled into a peculiar pattern that his colleagues now recognized as his "humans are at it again" expression. You realize this is all your fault, he said to Dr. Rodriguez, who was reviewing the latest batch of research proposals. That 10-minute igloo demonstration has evolved into something that's fundamentally changing galactic society. I prefer to think of it as catalyzing inevitable progress, she replied, gesturing to one of the displays. Have you seen what the Quantum Collective achieved last week? You mean their successful creation of stable microenvironments using probability manipulation? The ones they developed after watching humans build snow forts? Exactly. They've already adapted the technique for space station design. Apparently they can now create zones of absolute certainty within quantum flux fields, all because they wanted to make better ice rinks. Before Zixtal could respond, Jack burst into the office with his usual enthusiasm. You're not going to believe what the Magmarians just did. Do I want to know? Zixtal asked, his tentacles already curling defensively. They've figured out how to terraform small sections of their volcanic worlds into winter sports facilities. They're calling it extreme environmental contrast recreation. The physics department is having a field day studying the boundary layers between the hot and cold zones. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up the relevant data. Impressive. They're using principles from that first igloo demonstration, aren't they? Modified for magma-adjacent environments, yeah. Jack grinned. But here's the really cool part. The Venusians saw what they were doing and started experimenting with their own atmospheric manipulation techniques. They can now create stable gas form sculptures that last for months. There's talk about an interstellar art exhibition. Art? Zixtal's spots flickered in surprise. How did we get from survival techniques to art? Same way we got from igloos to the interstellar winter games, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Once species start seeing challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles, creativity follows naturally. It's the human way. Speaking of creativity, Jack added, pulling up another hologram. Wait until you see what they're planning for the zero-gravity games. The display showed a complex series of interconnected chambers floating in space, each maintaining different environmental conditions. Species from across the galaxy were using their unique adaptations to navigate between zones, creating what looked like an elaborate three-dimensional dance. They're calling it extreme environment parkour, Jack explained proudly. Each species has to adapt to rapidly changing conditions while maintaining their performance. The Quantum Collective is particularly good at it, something about existing in multiple states simultaneously giving them an edge. The scientific applications are remarkable, Dr. Rodriguez noted. We're seeing unprecedented advances in environmental adaptation technology, cross-species cooperation, and fundamental physics understanding. 3 different engineering departments have already requested funding to study the practical applications. And the Magmarians? Zixtal asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. They've developed a new form of spacesuit that can withstand both their natural temperature and the vacuum of space. They're quite proud of their solar prominence surfing technique. The professor's spots went through several colors before settling on a resigned purple. I suppose I should start working on another paper. The Evolution of Survival Adaptation into Cultural Revolution, a study of human-inspired innovation? Better make it a series, Dr. Rodriguez suggested. The Venusians just announced their plans for the first Interstellar Environmental Art Festival. Apparently they're going to attempt to create a gas-form replica of Earth's Grand Canyon, complete with temperature differential wind patterns. For art? For art, she confirmed. Though I heard the Atmospheric Science Department is very interested in the technical aspects, something about revolutionary new approaches to terraforming. Jack, who had been reviewing more incoming data, suddenly laughed. Oh, this is perfect. You know how the Quantum Collective got interested in human probability calculations after watching extreme sports? Yes? Zixtal said cautiously. They've just published a paper linking human risk assessment patterns to fundamental quantum mechanics. They're calling it the hold my beer theory of quantum observation. Dr. Rodriguez couldn't help but laugh. Let me guess. It suggests that human tendency to attempt improbable feats actually affects quantum outcomes? Got it in one, Jack grinned. Apparently our reckless optimism, as they call it, creates some kind of observer effect that makes theoretically impossible things slightly more possible. They're still working out the math, but 3 different physics departments are already fighting over the research rights. And to think, Zixtal mused, his spots showing a complex pattern of academic amusement. This all started because humans refused to accept that they couldn't survive on an ice planet. Oh, that reminds me, Jack said, pulling up yet another hologram. You might want to see this. The Magmarians are planning something special for next month's Extreme Environment Festival. The display showed what appeared to be preliminary plans for a massive structure that somehow combined elements of a water park, a volcano, and a quantum physics experiment. They're calling it the human experience, Dr. Rodriguez explained, reading through the proposal. It's designed to let various species safely experience different types of extreme environments and human adaptation techniques. Sort of a combination research facility, training center, and theme park. A theme park, Zixtal repeated, his tentacles drooping. Based on human survival techniques. With a full research division, educational facilities, and an interdisciplinary arts center. Jack added cheerfully. The Quantum Collective is already working on ways to make the rides exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. Something about maximizing the thrill factor through quantum uncertainty. You have to admit, Dr. Rodriguez said, watching the professor's spots cycle through various shades of disbelief. We've come a long way from questioning whether humans could survive extreme environments. Indeed, Zixtal agreed, his spots settling into a pattern that somehow managed to convey both academic pride and mild existential concern. Though I do have one question. Yes? This hold my beer theory. Please tell me it's not going to become a standard part of quantum physics curriculum. Jack and Dr. Rodriguez shared a look. Well, Jack said, trying to keep a straight face. The Quantum Collective did just establish a new research chair in human-inspired probability mathematics. They're calling it the Watch This Fellowship, Dr. Rodriguez added helpfully. Zixtal's spots went completely white. I need to write another paper. In the distance, through the office window, They could see a group of Magmarians practicing their new thermal contrast ballet routine, creating spectacular displays of instantly frozen lava sculptures, while a team of Venusian artists used controlled atmospheric effects to add gaseous special effects. 3 different research departments were already drafting grant proposals to study the phenomena involved. Just another day in the ongoing evolution of galactic society, human style. The end.